In football, the Pennsylvania teams were pretty good this year. In hockey, both teams quite sucked. We're going to do another off-season preview here, talking about the two Pennsylvania teams, which were the next two teams eliminated from playoff contention. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey Channel. Before we get into it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help out our channel. And we're on the road to 500 subscribers. And also don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below, so I'll discuss in today's video. And if you look at the football teams and if you look at the hockey teams, two vastly different things. I'm not talking about the football teams right now, but the Eagles and the Steelers were pretty good in the NFL this year. The Penguins and the Flyers were awful this year in the Pennsylvania teams in hockey, as the Penguins and the Flyers were the 7th and 8th team eliminated, including the 2nd and 3rd team in the Eastern Conference eliminated from playoff contention this year. So the Flyers, I think that's like what, 3, 4, maybe 5 years in a row now they've missed the playoffs. Well, it's the 3rd straight season, if I'm correct, with the Penguins not making the playoffs. It's the longest length of time Penguins missing the playoffs in the Crosby era. So really intriguing things there, as the Pennsylvania teams both missed the playoffs this year, so interesting note there. So as usual, in these off-season preview videos, we're going to look at the stats from this past season. I'm going to break down 3 reasons I think these teams both missed the playoffs. I'm also going to look at their UFAs, their RFAs, and their draft capital. And I'm going to give 5 ways I think these two teams should go about the off-season to get better for the future, maybe make the playoffs next year. So we're going to start off with the Philadelphia Flyers because they were eliminated one day before the Pittsburgh Penguins. So for the Flyers, if you look at their 3 leading goal scorers and point scorers, if you look at their point scorers at this point in time, you have Travis Konecny, who leads the team with 75 points. He's working out really well. He's almost a point per game at this point, so probably won't hit point per game, but he's really close to it, so he's looking really good. You have rookie Matvei Michkov, who's second on the team with 59 points. And then you have Sean Couturier, who's having a decent season, putting up 42 points. So once again, you like to see maybe 3, 4, or 5 guys hit 60 plus points. You're probably only going to have 2 in Philadelphia this year with Michkov and Konecny. So interesting note there, but those two have been really good star players for this team this year. If with their goal scoring, the top 2 point scorers are also their top 2 goal scorers. That's Konecny and Michkov lead the team with 24 goals. After them, you have Forrester, who has 22. So Forrester's actually worked out quite well for the Philadelphia Flyers. But still, it's just not enough to get this team into the playoffs. So Flyers were hovering around playoff mark at some points this year, but it's quite simply put, this team was not overly good this year. They're at 32, 37, and 9 record right now. Only have, I think, 3 or 4 games left, so very unlikely chance that they'll be able to hit the 500 mark now. So it's going to be another losing season there for the Flyers. If you look at their goals for and goals against, if you look at their goals for, it's not the worst in the world, but it's not overly great either. They've scored 222 goals for at this point in time, which goals for per game wise is good enough for 23rd in the NHL, whereas they've given up 268 goals against, which is quite awful. As goals against per game wise, it's 28th in the NHL. So defensively, this team was a little bit worse than they were offensively, but still, it's not overly great in either category for the Flyers. If you look at their power play and PK percentage, power play wise, this team was atrocious. They are currently running at a 14.8%, which was 30th in the NHL this year, whereas their PK has done all right. It's almost average. They're running at a 78% PK rate, which is 18th in the NHL. So power play is absolutely atrocious. It's something they really need to fix in the offseason. PK, you can definitely work on it. Like 18th is just below average. It's not overly bad, but you want to see him be a little bit better. So interesting note there. But their goal scoring for the season wasn't awful. Their goals against was in the bottom 5 of the league. Their power play was in the bottom 3 of the league, and their PK was average. So like, there's some bright spots there for Philadelphia Flyers, but they got a lot of work to do to get back into the playoffs. They currently have a projected $25.6 million in cap space for this upcoming offseason. If you look at 3 reasons I think this team missed the playoffs, 1, it's their terrible defense, like I just talked about. Goals against per game wise, they are 28th. That's bottom 5 in the NHL. It has not been an overly great defensive season there for the Flyers. Now, if you look at their defensive core, they have some decent pieces like Sanheim, York, Drysdale. Like, they do have some really good pieces on that blue line. It's just not a playoff caliber team right now on the defensive end. And I still have questions about Ersson and Fedotov in net. They weren't awful this year, but they weren't to starting level capabilities. So all in all, I think the terrible defense, with the defense not being up to par, on top of the fact that Ersson and Fedotov I don't think are right where they need to be, were the main reason in my opinion as to why his team missed the playoffs. The second was the subpar power play. Being in the bottom 3 of the league in the power play percentage, being under 15% is atrocious. It's something that this team's definitely going to need to work on. They have some really good pieces, like I talked about, Konechny, Mishkov. I wouldn't even be surprised if Forster got power play time next year, but they need that really solid, lethal goal scorer that can really bring that power play up to the next level. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but I think the fact that this team had an awful power play was another main reason as to why his team missed the playoffs. And the third was the fact that this team is still in the midst of a rebuild or retool, whatever you want to call it. This team announced, not this past offseason, but the offseason prior, that they were going to go through a rebuild phase, and they really want to try and take it down and then try and rebuild back up with prospects and players. And they had a stunningly good season last year. It didn't result in the playoffs, they just missed out, but it was a really good season. I think that sort of hindered what they were going to do this year, but they did make a couple of interesting moves, got his team a little bit weaker, and then this year they were definitely one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference. They were still somewhat close to a playoff spot, but it was not close enough to get them to a playoff spot. But given the fact this team's still in a rebuild and a retool, still a very likely possibility to move off a couple pieces in the offseason to get a little bit worse. That's another big reason as to why the Flyers team missed the playoffs. So in my opinion, the terrible defense, the extremely low power play, and the fact that this team's still going through a rebuild or a retool are the 3 main reasons in my opinion why the Flyers missed the playoffs. Going over to their significant pending UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for this upcoming offseason. Now if you look at their significant pending UFAs, there's not a whole bunch here, and definitely not a whole bunch of top end talent. They have Rodrigo Bulls, they have Olli Lykesell, Giovanni Smith, Lucas Belpedio, and Cal Peterson. Peterson and Belpedio haven't gone to any NHL action this year. Peterson was a cap dump a couple of years ago from Los Angeles, and Belpedio is a depth AHLer. So at this point, I think both of those guys will probably walk. Giovanni Smith had 13 games played, but that was with the Sharks and the Avalanche before he was dealt to Philadelphia. I think there's a relative chance he'll walk. You also have Olli Lykesell and Rodrigo Bulls. Both got 5 points. Lykesell in 19 games, Bulls in 23. Both have shown they could be decent bomb 6 call-up option forwards. So I wouldn't be surprised if they got like 1 to 2 year deals at like league minimum, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they maybe let go. So I wouldn't be overly shocked if the Flyers brought none of their UFAs back. If we look at the pending RFAs, there are a couple more intriguing ones than the UFA side. If we look at the RFAs, they have Helge Grans, Cam York, Tyson Forster, Jacob Pelche, Elliot Desnoyers, Zayd Wisdom, and Noah Cates. Now, Desnoyers and Wisdom are decent prospects. Didn't get into any NHL action this year, but I think could be brought back like 1 to 2 year deals to keep them in the organization. You also have Pelche, Forster, and Cates. Cates had 15 goals and 34 points in 74 games. Pelche had 6 goals and 18 points in 45 games with the Flyers and the Flames. And Forster had 22 goals and 39 points in 77 games. So Forster and Cates look like extremely talented players. Forster, I think, could eventually be a 30 goal scorer in the top 6, and Cates has worked out quite well as a defensive-minded third-line center. So I would not be always surprised if those two are brought back, maybe on longer-term deals. Pelche is a decent prospect. He was brought in the Kuzmenko deal. He's worked all right in Philadelphia, so I do wonder if the Flyers might give him like a 2 to 3 year deal to keep him in the Flyers organization. On the defensive end, you have Helge Grans and Cam York. Grant's gone to 6 games of NHL action this year, putting up an assist. I think long term he could be a decent third pair defenseman, so wouldn't be surprised if he was brought back. Cam York has 4 goals and 16 points in 62 games. Now he's coming out of his ELC, but he has not worked out overly well this year. He's definitely taking a few steps back, so I do wonder if there's a possibility the Flyers could try and trade him in the offseason, so we're going to have to wait and see on that, but I definitely think that there's a very likely possibility Cates, Pelche, Forster, Grants are definitely back, probably Wisdom and Desnoyers too, and I think York will either be signed and brought back or will be traded, so we're going to wait and see on that. Next, going over to their draft capital for this upcoming offseason, they have the most draft capital of any teams we've talked about so far. They currently have 11 picks for this upcoming draft, 4 more than the usual team. They have 3 first-round picks, their own, the Oilers, and the Avalanche. They have 4 second-round picks, their own, the Ducks, the Jackets, and the Flames. They have their own third-round pick. They have no fourth-round picks. They have their own the Hurricanes' 5th-round pick. They have their own 6th-round pick and no 7th-round picks. So they don't have a 7th-rounder. They don't have a 4th-rounder, but they do have an extra pick in the 5th round, 2 extra picks in the 1st round, and 3 extra picks in the 2nd round. So they have 7 top 64 picks in this year's draft. That is an abundance of draft capital, and that could lead them to try and move some of that draft capital to get instant upgrades for this team, which is something I think Philadelphia desperately needs to do. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But 11 picks is how many the Flyers have, including 7 in the first 2 rounds. And lastly, going over to 5 ways I can see this team improve in the offseason to get better for next year. Now, one has to be consider moving Rasmus Ristolainen. Now, Ristolainen was basically the one lone trade target that a lot of people were speculating the Flyers could move who didn't get moved in season. Like, they moved Farabee in season, Frost in season, Lawton in season, Eric Johnson, who wasn't that big of a trade candidate in season. But they did move Rasmus Ristolainen. Apparently, they had a really high asking price. I think it was like a first-round pick and a decent prospect for Ristolainen, and no one really ponied up the asking price. On top of that, Ristolainen's had some injury troubles this year, so I'm sure a lot of teams were concerned. But in the offseason, I wonder if there's a potentiality that he could get traded. I think he's got 1 or 2 years left at a $5.1 million cap hit. So I'm definitely not sure if the Flyers will keep him, especially if they feel like they're going to be in a rebuilding phase again next year. So I think there's a possibility we could see Rasmus Ristolainen move, especially given the fact that that blue line needs some work on it. Second is, I think, just like we mentioned with a couple of other teams, they've talked about they need to give some of their younger guys more opportunity at the NHL level. That's guys like Jet Luchenko, Denver Barkey, Nikita Grebinkin, who they just acquired from Toronto, Oliver Blanc, or Helgi Grans. I think all deserve chances, at least shots in training camp at the NHL roster. Luchenko got a short stint at the start of the season. Grebinkin's been called up a couple of times with the Leafs and with the Flyers and play a couple of NHL games. Grans, we just talked about, also got into a couple of NHL games, and then Barkey and Blanc are top-end prospects. So I do wonder if the Flyers could try and get some of these guys into the NHL as early as next year. So it's more of a training camp issue, but still something we have to watch out for. Next is the York situation. They have to figure it out. York's a pending RFA. There was a lot of speculation that he had a spat with John Tortorella before he got fired. Once again, can't confirm that or anything, but it does seem like York's time in Philadelphia might be coming to an end. Like, York has not had the overly great season. Like, he's only got 16 points in over 60 games of NHL action this year. Not the sort of guy that the Flyers were hoping for. Last year, he started the season in the AHL. So, like, he's definitely not been the player that I think a lot of Flyers were hoping for. So I do wonder if that could lead them to moving him. Now, given the fact he's an RFA, if they don't move him, I think they will try and sign him to like a 1 to 2 year deal, see if they can still salvage something with York. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but either extending York on a 1 to 2 year deal and keeping him in the Flyers organization, or moving York has to be a priority for Philadelphia this upcoming offseason. The fourth thing I think is adding a veteran goaltender. As I've talked about, I do not believe Fedotov and Ersson can go through another season as a tandem. I think they could benefit drastically from adding a veteran. Now, personally, I think they should try and either demote one of Fedotov or Ersson, or have them as like their third stringer and get someone who could be a tandem with one of those two guys. I could also see maybe try and add like a veteran third stringer just to sort of be rotating in there and provide some veteran leadership. But given the fact this Flyers team has basically no veteran experience on the goaltending side whatsoever, I think that would benefit drastically from adding a veteran guy, even if it's not like a pure starting level goaltender, even if it's more of like a backup, like say a Jake Allen in free agency. I think this team would benefit much from adding a veteran level goaltender, so I think that's another priority the Flyers have to look at. And the last one is moving some of their picks to add instant help. Now, we just talked about, the Flyers had 3 first-round picks, 7 picks in the first 2 rounds of this upcoming year's draft. So they have the capacity to move off some of that draft capital and get some instant upgrades. I could see it maybe move like a 2nd-round pick or a 1st-round pick if it made sense enough to go after a guy like maybe a Chris Kreider in the Rangers organization, a Andrew Kopp in the Red Wings organization, Nick Robertson in the Maple Leafs organization, or like a Kirby Dach in the Montreal Canadiens organization. I think there's a couple of options out there for the Flyers that they could try and target to try and add some more help. Like we talked about, I could definitely see him try and rework their blue line. Also, I'd be surprised if they use some of their draft capital to add a star level forward. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But in my opinion, considering moving Ristolainen, getting their younger guys some more playing time, either extending or moving York, adding a veteran goaltender, and moving some of their draft capital for instant upgrades would be, in my opinion, smart moves for the Flyers to do this offseason to get better for next year. So that's the Flyers portion of it. And we'll have to wait and see if the Flyers do this to try and end their playoff throughout next season. And next, going over to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, when it comes to the Penguins side of things, they also did not have an overly great season this year. They were hovering below the 500 mark for quite a bit of time, and even though at some points it looked like they might have been a playoff team, it just never happened this year for the Penguins. So there's a lot of changes coming for the Penguins too. If we look at their stats for this year, if we look at their point scoring and goal scoring leaders, their point scoring leaders, not surprisingly, Crosby leads the team with 89 points right now, followed by Rakell, who has 68 points, and Brian Rust, who has 63 points. So they do have a couple of 60-plus point players, which is good. It's just not good enough to get them into the playoffs. And then goal scoring wise, Rakell leads the team with 34 goals, a solid season here from Rakell. Crosby had 32 goals, so a pretty good season goal scoring wise from him. And Rust is 1 goal away from 30, having 29 goals. So once again, Crosby, Rust, Rakell leading the charge offensively this year, which has been really good for Pittsburgh. And they at least have some decent 30 goal scorers and 60-point players, so interesting note there. If you go over to the record, they have a 33, 35, and 12 record. There is a slight possibility they could still finish at a 500 record, but it's very slight. And then if you look at their goal scoring and goals against for this year, goal scoring wise, they weren't actually too bad. They scored 236 goals this year, which is good enough right now for being tied for 18th goals for per game wise. So it's not the greatest of goal scoring teams, but they were just a little bit below average, so it's not too bad. But goals against wise, this team was awful. They gave up 281 goals against, which goals against per game wise was good enough for 30th in the NHL. So they were a bottom 3 team this year in the goals against department. The bad goaltending and a really bad blue line contributed to that a lot this year. So the Penguins were not an overly great defensive team, had a decent offensive season, but not a great defensive team. Power play and PK wise, they weren't actually too bad. Power play wise, they're running at a 25.5% power play right now, which is good enough for 7th in the NHL. So they have a top 10 power play, which isn't overly bad. And their PK, well, it's not great, is running at a 78.2% PK rate, which is good enough for 17th in the NHL, which is just below average. So PK wise, they were average. Power play wise, they're in the top 10. So the special teams wasn't overly bad for the Penguins. Goal scoring wise wasn't overly bad for the Penguins, but goals against, that team just could not get the puck out of the net this year. They currently have a projected $23.8 million in cap space for this year. So going over the 3 reasons I think the Penguins did miss the playoffs this year. One was terrible goaltending. The goaltending this year for the Penguins was atrocious. They had Nedeljkovic play a couple of games. They had Blomqvist play a couple of games. Jarry started the season as a starter, was sent down on waivers, and then was called back up. Since being called up, he's been all right, but still, no goaltender, I'm pretty sure, on the Penguins has had a above 900 save percentage, and they all have a sub 3 GAA. They are not looking overly good in net. Now, Nedeljkovic has 1 more season left on his deal. Blomqvist is a younger player. Jarry had, I think, 2 or 3 years left on his deal. I'm not sure how they're going to make all of this work in the offseason, but I think the goaltending was a major reason as to why this team missed the playoffs this year, and Jarry was a big part of that. The second reason, in my opinion, as to why this Penguins team missed the playoffs was awful team defense. The defense was not overly great this year for the Pittsburgh Penguins team defense-wise. I know that they had a lot of really good goal scorers this year, but that structure defensively was not there, and even though the goaltenders were a big part of it, as to why this team did not have an overly great goals against, the team defense was another big reason as to why this team was so bad this year. So the complete team defense was another reason, in my opinion, as to why this team missed the playoffs. And third was not enough depth scoring. We just talked about how Crosby, Rakell, Rust, they all had really good seasons. I think even a guy like Malkin had a really good season too. But their depth scoring, their bottom 6, did not contribute enough. Usually for playoff caliber teams, you see a bottom 6 contribute a whole bunch of points, a whole bunch of goals. You can see a couple of guys in the 3rd line or the 4th line get 10, 15 goals, 30, 40 points. Those are the makings of a really good team with really good depth. This year, the Penguins did not have that sort of a depth on that team. They had some decent players playing in bottom 6 roles, but they were never able to sort of contribute to the level that playoff caliber teams have the bottom 6 to contribute. So in my opinion, terrible goaltending, awful team defense, and the fact that this team did not have enough depth scoring were the 3 main reasons, in my opinion, why the Pittsburgh Penguins team missed the playoffs. Going over to the UFAs, RFAs, and draft capital for this upcoming offseason. I feel like their UFAs, there's not a whole bunch here. They have Matt Nieto, Matt Grzelcyk, and then Nathan Klerman, Matt Hollowell, and Colton Pullman. Hollowell, Pullman, Klerman have all basically been AHLers this year. Klerman got into one NHL game, but they're all AHLers. I would not be one bit surprised if they all left. You have Matt Grzelcyk, who had a goal and 36 points in 79 games. I wouldn't be surprised if the Penguins took a run to try and sign him like a 1 to 2 year deal. And then you have Matt Nieto, who had a goal and 3 points in 32 games. Still was injured this year, played sometime at the AHL level. I wouldn't be overly surprised if Nieto left as well. So I think the one lone UFA the Penguins will try and re-sign is Grzelcyk. But besides that, I don't really see any of those guys being brought back. If you look at their pending RFAs, they have Emil Bemstrom, Connor Dewar, Philip Tomasino, Vasily Ponomarov, Connor Timmins, Pierre-Olivier Joseph, and Tyler Gaucher. Now, Gaucher in the AHLs looked quite good this year for the Penguins. I think eventually could be a backup for the Penguins, so I wouldn't be surprised if they brought him back. Yeah, Pierre-Olivier Joseph and Connor Timmins, so they both acquired in season. Joseph had 3 assists in 47 games. Timmins 15 points in 66 games. I think Timmins might be brought back in like a 1 to 2 year deal. Wouldn't be surprised if Joseph was let go. So I'll have to wait and see on those two guys. Forward group wise, you got Connor Dewar, who they acquired in season. You got Emil Bemstrom. You got Philip Tomasino, who they acquired in season, and youngster Vasily Ponomarov. Wouldn't be surprised if Ponomarov wound up staying in like a 1 or 2 year deal in the AHL. I think Tomasino's shown enough, as well as Dewar. They'll probably wind up being brought back. Dewar has 9 points in 46 games. Tomasino has 10 goals and 21 points in 59 games. So both guys look quite good for the Penguins. On top of that, Bemstrom has an assist in 14 games. Wouldn't be surprised if he was brought back on a short-term deal. Also wouldn't be overly shocked if he was let go. So we're going to have to see on that, but I think Dewar's definitely going to be brought back. So is Tomasino, so is Timmins, so is Gaucher. And I'll have to wait and see on Ponomarov, Pierre-Olivier Joseph, and Bemstrom. So I'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to the draft capital this team has for this upcoming offseason. Just like their Pennsylvania rivals, the Penguins have 11 draft selections for this upcoming season. They have theirs and the New York Rangers' first-round pick. They have the Capitals' second-round pick. They have their own, the Senators, and the Wild third-round pick. They have their own fourth-round pick. They have the Hawks and the Rangers' fifth-round pick. They have their own sixth-round pick and their own seventh-round pick. So a lot of their own draft selections, plus they have the Rangers first, the Caps second, the Sens and Wild third, and the Hawks and Rangers fifth. So they do have a lot of extra draft capital. They have 2 first-round picks and 6 picks in the first 3 rounds of the draft. So Penguins definitely have a lot of draft capital to utilize this offseason. So interesting out there, but that's a lot of picks this upcoming offseason, 11 in total. And lastly, going over to 5 ways I can see this team improving to get better for the future. So the first thing I think this team needs to do is move Rakell. Rakell was one of the guys who was mentioned heavily in the trade rumor mill. It sounded like the Penguins made an absurd asking price of like 2 first-round picks and a top prospect for Rakell. I don't think that team is going to pony up this sort of an asking price, but if they were to get like a first-round pick and decent prospect, I think that a lot of teams would be interested in acquiring Rakell. Rakell's a really solid guy. He's about to have another 30-goal season, most likely a 35-goal season. He's nearing the 70-point plateau. Like, Rakell's had a fantastic season this year. Now, he was one of the goal-scoring drivers for the Penguins, so I'm not sure if they really want to move on from him unless it's the right deal, but I do think there's a really good possibility we could see the Penguins move off of Rakell. I think that's the first priority. Second priority is find some way to get out of the Jarry contract. I'm not sure what the buyout cost would be. I would not be one bit surprised if they considered a buyout of Jarry. I'm not sure if they try and trade him with retained salary. I'm not sure if they try and just bury him in the minors come the start of the next season, but they have to find some way to get out of the Jarry contract. It has not worked out overly well since Jarry resigned in Pittsburgh, and I think at this point the experiment's over. They need a new starting level goaltender. So I think moving on from Jarry and trying to add another someone else to be the new starter has to be a priority for the Penguins. And I don't know exactly how they're going to go about doing this, but I think moving Jarry has to be a top priority. Next, we'll be moving some of their draft capital for younger players. Now, I'm not sure exactly what sort of draft capital they can move. Like, they have 3 third-round picks. I wouldn't be surprised if they consider moving one of their third-round picks. And guys who come to mind who could potentially be younger players they could try and target would be a guy like Matthias Michelli in Utah, Nils Höglander in Vancouver, or Philip Kurashev in Chicago. All those guys are younger players who have been mentioned in the trade rumor mill, who I think could benefit the Penguins' top 9. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But they have so much draft capital, 11 picks in total for this upcoming offseason. I definitely think there's a possibility that we see some of their draft picks get moved for younger players. So we're going to have to see on that. Next, I think has to be reworking the bottom 6. As I talked about, the bottom 6 goal scoring was not there this year, so they need to rework some things. Like Noel Acciari, I'm not sure if he'll get moved. I think he's got 1 year left on his deal. They have a couple of other guys on 1 year deals in their bottom six who I could see them wind up getting moved. Kevin Hayes is another guy. So I wouldn't be overly shocked if the Penguins dealt a couple of their bottom sixes, maybe try to get some guys in for agency. Not sure who they could try and target, but I definitely think they could try and rework that bottom six to maybe have it to be a little more productive than it has been in the past. So I think reworking the bottom six has to be a priority. And the last one, just like the Flyers, just like a couple of other these guys, is let some of their younger players play. Like have Tristan Broz, Vasily Ponomarov, Rucker McGrady, Owen Pickering, or Emil Painaniemi have challenging for playoff spots in training camp. Maybe none of these guys wind up getting it, but they should at least be able to challenge for a playoff spot, because I do think 2 or 3 of them could wind up being NHL ready as soon as next year. So once again, more of a training camp situation, but still something that the Penguins need to try and leave a couple of spots open for some of their prospects. Definitely, those are the 5 things I think the Penguins should do this offseason to try and improve and get better for next year, so they can maybe try and end this playoff drought that they're in right now. So definitely, that's all I want to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think of the Flyers and the Penguins? Are you surprised that these two teams were the second and third team eliminated in the Eastern Conference? Are you surprised that the Penguins have missed this many years? And what do you think these two teams can do in the offseason to get better for next year? Definitely take your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you'd like to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. It really does help the channel, and we're on the road to 500 subscribers. And also don't forget to leave a comment. Also the blog, tournament news, numbers, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll link that in the description below. I can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.